For 1,000 years, the Salvok Dominion ruled the galaxy. Their war fleets had crushed countless civilizations, leaving behind only ruins and slaves. No species dared to challenge them. They were the masters of the stars, and they believed no power could threaten their empire. But then, the signal came. It was a short transmission, a forgotten code buried deep in the ancient satellites orbiting the Sol system, home to the one species the Salvok had chosen to ignore for centuries: humans. The signal spread like wildfire through the Salvok's intelligence networks. No one knew where it had come from or why it had activated after so many years of silence. But one thing was certain: the moment the signal was sent, something terrifying awakened in the depths of space. The spy's warning. Inside the Grand War Station, Salvok Prime, High Lord Virex, stood before his war council. He was a towering figure with crimson scales and piercing golden eyes, the undisputed ruler of the Salvok Dominion. His empire had faced many enemies, but none had ever made him feel fear. Until now. A trembling spy knelt before him, his black uniform drenched in sweat. This was Agent Veklen, the best Salvok intelligence officer in the galaxy. He had just returned from a secret mission inside human space. What he had seen had shaken him to his core. "My lord," Veklen gasped, trying to steady his breathing. "The signal. It has awakened something. Humanity's death fleet is moving." Silence filled the chamber. The warlords around Virex exchanged uncertain glances. Death fleet. That was just an old legend, a myth told by dying species who had fought humans long ago. Virex narrowed his eyes. "You are certain?" Veklen nodded furiously. "Yes, my lord. The human colonies were too quiet. Their military bases have gone dark. Their deep space outposts have vanished. And their shipyards." He hesitated. "Have started building warships faster than anything we have ever seen." The warlord scoffed. "Impossible. Humans are weak. Their forces are nothing compared to ours." Veklen's voice was barely above a whisper. "You are wrong." Then he placed a small holographic device on the table. It activated, showing grainy footage from deep inside the solar system. At first, the warlord saw nothing but stars. But then a shadow moved, something massive. And then another. And another. Dozens. No, hundreds of ships, silent, dark, and deadly. "This," Veklen said, his voice shaking, "is what your fleets will face. The forgotten threat." The Salvok Dominion had dismissed humans long ago. After the First Galactic War, humanity had retreated into their own sector, never expanding, never interfering. For centuries, they had been silent. Too silent. The Death Fleet was a phantom force, something even the Salvok had only heard whispers about. According to legend, these ships had been built in secret, scattered across deep space, waiting for a single command. A command that had just been given. Virex clenched his fists. If the Death Fleet truly exists, why have they not moved before now? Veklen hesitated, then said, "Because humanity never wanted war. Until now." The High Lord rose from his throne. His voice was calm, but inside, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Doubt. "We must strike first," Virex declared, "before they can fully awaken." His warlords nodded, eager for battle. They did not understand the danger. But Veklen understood. He had seen the truth, and he knew that if the Salvok attacked, humanity would not stop until their entire empire burned. The first move. The Salvok Dominion mobilized its largest fleet in history. Thousands of warships prepared to invade the solar system. Their plan was simple: destroy Earth before the Death Fleet could activate. Within days, the fleet moved into position. The massive flagship, Devourer of Worlds, led the attack, its weapons fully charged. The countdown began. In moments, the first strike would begin. But just as the fleet crossed into human space, every screen inside every Salvok warship went black. A message from the void. A deep, distorted voice echoed through their systems. "You should not have come." The Xalvok commanders panicked. Their navigational systems shut down. Their weapons stopped responding. Their ships froze in space, trapped by an invisible force. Then, out of the darkness, something moved. At first, it looked like shadows shifting in space. Then the Xalvok realized it was warships, human warships. But these were not ordinary ships. They were massive, ancient-looking vessels, their hulls black as night, covered in runes and markings no one could understand. Their design was unlike anything in the galaxy. They had been waiting. They had always been waiting. Then, one by one, their weapons powered up. A cold, mechanical voice whispered across the enemy fleet. Death Fleet activated, beginning extermination. The last moment of peace. On Xalvok Prime, Virex watched the live footage from his throne room. His great war fleet, the pride of his empire, was now surrounded, trapped, helpless. His heart pounded. No, this isn't possible. The warlords stood frozen in horror. They had expected a weak enemy. Instead, they had woken up a sleeping monster, a monster that had been preparing for this war for centuries. Then the first human warship fired. One shot, and an entire Xalvok battleship exploded, vanishing in an instant. It had begun. Humanity's death fleet had moved to strike. On the command bridge of the Devourer of Worlds, Supreme Admiral Kavak gritted his teeth. His fleet was the largest in Xalvok history, trained, disciplined, and armed with weapons that had conquered entire civilizations. But none of that mattered now. His fleet was paralyzed, and the human ships were preparing to fire. Emergency systems online. Now, Kavak roared. His crew scrambled, desperately trying to restore control. One of his officers shouted, "My lord, it's the human signal. It's interfering with." Then, the first human shot landed. The Black Ship's Wrath. A single human warship fired. It was massive, unlike anything seen before. A black monolith gliding silently through space. No lights, no signals, only death. Its weapon activated, a single pulse of energy. In an instant, an entire Xalvok battleship vaporized. No explosion, no debris. It was simply gone. Silence filled the Xalvok bridge. Then, Kavak's officers screamed. More human warships appeared, their weapons charging. The Death Fleet was not here to negotiate. They were here to end the war before it even began. Xalvok's desperate counterattack. "Override all systems. We must fight," Kavak shouted. His engineers worked furiously, and after agonizing minutes, the fleet's systems came back online. "We have weapons," an officer yelled. Kavak wasted no time. Fire. The entire Xalvok fleet unleashed its firepower. Thousands of energy blasts, torpedoes, and missile swarms raced toward the human ships. For a brief moment, Kavak thought they had a chance. Then something impossible happened. The human defense. The Death Fleet did not evade. It did not retreat. Instead, the human warships absorbed the attacks. The energy blasts vanished into their black hulls, as if the ships were devouring them. The missiles struck, but did nothing. Kavak's heart pounded. That's not possible. His sensors officer's voice shook. "My lord, their ships are self-repairing. They have no weaknesses." Kavak's blood ran cold. Then the humans returned fire. The massacre begins. What happened next was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The human warships fired beams of black energy, each one disintegrating an enemy ship instantly. They moved with terrifying precision, striking only critical targets, dismantling the Xalvok fleet one ship at a time. "Retreat! Retreat!" Kavak screamed. But it was too late. A human warship locked onto the Devourer of Worlds. Its weapons charge. Kavak barely had time to react before his entire world turned to darkness. The Xalvok High Command watches in horror. On Xalvok Prime, High Lord Virex and his warlords stood in silence, watching the live feed of the battle. The greatest fleet in their history was being erased before their eyes. One warlord finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. This is not war. This is a reckoning." Virex's hands trembled. "We have underestimated the humans." "No," another warlord corrected. "We have doomed ourselves." The last transmission. As the Xalvok fleet was annihilated, a final message came through the High Command screens. A distorted human voice. Calm. Cold. Unstoppable. "Your mistake was believing we have forgotten. Your mistake was believing we have forgiven. Now we come for you." The screen went black. Virex's heart pounded. His empire had ruled for 1,000 years. Now it might not survive the next 1,000 hours. The Death Fleet was coming, and nothing could stop them. On the distant world of Vorlus 9, one of the Xalvok Empire's largest military colonies, alarms screamed through the air. Governor Xervac stood in his command bunker, his claws digging into the metal console as he stared at the reports. "Impossible," he whispered. Just 4 hours ago, Vorlus 9 had been secure. The colony was home to 12 million Xalvok citizens, a massive planetary defense system, and one of the strongest fleets in the Empire. Now, in less than an hour, it was on the verge of complete destruction. The human fleet had arrived without warning. They had jammed all communications. They had disabled planetary defenses in minutes. And now, they were on the surface. The unseen invasion. Unlike any enemy before, the humans did not attack with brute force. There was no grand planetary bombardment, no chaotic airstrikes, no long, drawn-out battles. The Death Fleet moved with eerie precision. Entire sections of the city vanished in the blink of an eye, consumed by silent black explosions that left nothing behind, not even rubble. Xervac's military officers screamed into their comms, trying to mobilize forces, but their voices were drowned out by the sound of terror. Then came the worst part. The humans themselves, the black soldiers of humanity. Xervac had read reports about human soldiers before. He had studied their past wars, their weapons, their combat tactics. But this was something different. The humans who landed on Vorlus 9 were not normal troops. They wore black armor, sleek and unmarked, with no insignia, no glowing visors, just dark, faceless warriors. They moved like shadows, appearing and disappearing in seconds. And when they struck, they did not miss. The Xalvok military fights back. Desperate, Xervac ordered every available unit to counter the human invasion. Tanks rolled into the streets. Airships took to the skies. Elite Xalvok shock troops deployed in full force, aiming to crush the enemy. But it didn't matter. The humans adapted instantly. Tanks exploded before they could fire. Airships plummeted from the sky, their engines failing mysteriously. Soldiers fired their weapons, but their shots passed through the human invaders as if they weren't even there. Then the humans fired back. A new kind of warfare. It wasn't energy blasts. It wasn't plasma or kinetic rounds. It was something worse. Each human soldier carried a weapon unlike anything the Xalvok had seen, a small device on their wrists that emitted black pulses of energy. And when those pulses hit a Xalvok soldier, they didn't die. They simply ceased to exist. No body, no remains, just emptiness, as if they had never been there at all. Xervac's officers watched in horror. The Xalvok troops, trained for war, panicked and ran. Some screamed. Others dropped their weapons. Many simply stood frozen in place, unable to process what they were seeing. It wasn't just warfare. It was erasure, a message from the void. Xervac gritted his teeth. He had spent his entire life serving the Empire. He had conquered worlds. He had destroyed civilizations. But today, he was going to die. A transmission flickered onto his command console. A human figure appeared. A soldier in the same black armor, his face hidden behind a featureless mask. His voice was calm, emotionless. The Salvok Empire has reached the end of its reign. Servac's breath caught in his throat. The human continued. This is not war. This is a consequence. Servac clenched his fists. You think you can destroy an empire? Do you have any idea what we? Yes, the human interrupted. That's why we're here. Then the transmission cut out. And at that moment, the true destruction began. The end of Boundless 9. The sky split apart. Massive black ships descended through the atmosphere, their hulls glowing with strange energy. They did not fire. They did not speak. Instead, the world itself began to collapse. The ground trembled. Cities vanished. The air grew silent as the humans activated some unknown technology, breaking the very fabric of reality on Boundless 9. And then, the planet ceased to exist. No explosion, no debris, no ruins, just silence. The Death Fleet did not leave wreckage behind. They left nothing. The Empire realizes the truth. Across the galaxy, Salvok High Command watched in horror. One of their greatest military colonies, gone, erased as if it had never existed. Virex, the supreme High Lord of the Empire, stood frozen. His warlords whispered in fear. Some refused to believe it. Others fell to their knees, their bodies shaking. For the first time in history, the Salvok understood what was happening. This was not a war. This was not retaliation. This was an extinction event. And humanity was just getting started. The destruction of Boundless 9 sent shockwaves across the Salvok Empire. Entire sectors went silent. Governors and military leaders desperately sent out messages for reinforcements, but no one responded, because there was no one left. One by one, Salvok colonies vanished. Not bombed, not invaded, erased. Planets that once held billions of Salvok citizens simply ceased to exist. Every signal, every transmission, every sign of life was snuffed out in a matter of hours. The Salvok leadership panicked. They had faced strong enemies before. They had fought brutal wars, but nothing had ever destroyed them like this. The Council in crisis. Deep within the heart of the Empire, on the throne world of Zaltor, the High Council gathered in desperation. The Supreme High Lord Virex sat on his towering throne, his claws gripping the armrests so hard that the metal groaned under the pressure. Around him, warlords and strategists argued, shouted, and screamed. We must strike back. One roared. We are the Salvok Empire. We do not kneel to lesser creatures. They are not lesser. Another snapped. His scales were pale, his eyes filled with terror. They are something else. Something unnatural. Virex slammed his fist onto the table. Enough, he growled. I will not listen to cowards. The humans bleed. We will make them bleed. The room fell silent. Then a voice echoed through the chamber. No, you won't. The council turned, their eyes widening in horror. A human stood at the far end of the room. A soldier in black armor, his face hidden behind a featureless mask. He had somehow entered the most secured chamber in the Empire. No alarms had gone off. No guards had stopped him. It was as if he had simply appeared. The first contact, in their own chamber. Virex rose from his throne, his muscles tensed. How dare you enter this place, human? The soldier took a step forward. His boots made no sound. We warned you, he said. His voice was calm, empty. Warned us. One of the warlords snarled. You attacked our empire without cause. You slaughtered our people, like you slaughtered ours. Silence. The human soldier tilted his head slightly. For centuries, your empire has erased species from existence. You believed yourselves untouchable. You believed your crimes had no consequence. Virex narrowed his eyes. And now you seek revenge. The human shook his head. No, we seek balance. A cold warning. The air in the chamber grew heavy. Every Xalvok warlord felt something they had never felt before. It was more than fear. It was the knowledge that they had already lost. The human raised a gloved hand. The Xalvok Empire has two choices, he said. Surrender or disappear. The warlords hissed in outrage. One of them lunged forward, claws bared. And then he was gone. No sound, no struggle. 1 second he was there. The next, nothing remained. Not even dust. The human lowered his hand. Your time is over. He turned and began to walk away. Virex roared in fury. Kill him. Blasters fired. Energy weapons screamed. Every single shot passed through the human's body as if he wasn't even there. And then he was gone, as if he had never been there at all. The last stand of the Xalvok fleet. Desperation turned to madness. The Xalvok threw everything they had into stopping the human advance. They gathered their largest fleet, over 10,000 warships, and launched a desperate counterattack near the Param Nexus, the gateway to their core worlds. For the first time, the full might of the Xalvok military prepared to fight the human death fleet. They never stood a chance. The battle that wasn't. Admiral Zirkin, one of the Xalvok's most brilliant strategists, stood on the bridge of the Warbringer, his empire's flagship. He watched as the human fleet arrived. A perfect formation of massive black warships, each one eerily silent. No comms, no signals, no energy spikes. Just waiting. Zirkin's fleet opened fire. Thousands of plasma beams and missiles lit up the void. But before the weapons could even reach the human ships, they simply vanished. The energy fizzled out. The missiles ceased to exist. Zirkin's blood ran cold. No, this isn't possible. Then the humans struck back. A single pulse rippled across the battlefield. One by one, Xalvok warships blinked out of existence. Not destroyed, not disabled, erased. In less than 5 minutes, 10,000 Xalvok ships were gone. Admiral Zirkin stood frozen, his mouth dry, his hands shaking. The Warbringer was the last ship remaining. And then, a single human figure appeared on the bridge, standing right in front of him. The same black-armored soldier from the High Council chamber. Zirkin fell to his knees. "Please," he whispered, "have mercy." The human tilted his head. "Mercy." He paused. "You never gave it to us." And with that, the Warbringer was gone. The Empire's last breath. News of the fleet's destruction spread fast. Entire colonies surrendered without a fight. Some worlds destroyed themselves, choosing death over facing the humans. And on Saltor, the throne world of the Empire, Virex stood alone in his palace, staring at the sky. A sky filled with black ships. He knew it was over. The Xalvok Empire was finished. But the humans weren't done yet, because there was still one last step to take. Zaltor would fall, and when it did, the Xalvok would be nothing but a memory. Zaltor was a planet of billions. Once, its towering cities stood as monuments to the Xalvok's dominance. Now, they were filled with panic. The streets overflowed with terrified citizens, clawing at each other to reach evacuation ships. The wealthy abandoned the poor. Warlords turned on each other, blaming rivals for the disaster. And high above, the unstoppable enemy waited. The Xalvok military, what was left of it, scrambled their defenses. But they all knew the truth. Nothing could stop this. Nothing could save them. The Emperor's last plea. Deep within the royal palace, Supreme High Lord Virex stood before a massive communications array. His hands trembled as he sent a final desperate message across the stars. To the humans, to the ones they had underestimated. His arrogance had doomed them all, and he knew it. With a shaky breath, he spoke. "Humans, I beg you." His voice, once filled with pride, now held only fear. "End the war. We will surrender. We will give you our worlds, our resources, everything. Silence. He swallowed. Please, he whispered. We are not ready to die. A single response. For long moments, nothing happened. Then, a voice echoed through the chamber. Cold. Empty. Final. Neither were we. Virex froze. And then, the signal cut out. The humans had given their answer. No mercy. The storm breaks. The sky turned black as the Death Fleet moved. The Salvok watched in horror as the human ships descended, filling the atmosphere like an endless swarm. The planetary defense grid opened fire, launching millions of plasma bolts toward the incoming warships. But not a single shot landed. They all vanished, erased. The humans did not fight a conventional war. They didn't need to, because whatever technology they wielded, it was beyond understanding, beyond reality itself. The death march begins. The first wave landed in the capital. Black armored soldiers, moving without sound, without hesitation. The Salvok defenders fired everything they had: rifles, tanks, artillery. Nothing worked. Bullets and energy blasts passed through the human warriors like they weren't even there. And then, with a simple motion, the humans wiped them away. Not killed, not injured, just gone. The Salvok people screamed as their soldiers vanished into thin air. Entire battalions were erased in seconds. And the humans kept marching forward. No resistance, no hope. City by city, block by block, the humans advanced. No weapons could stop them. No strategy could slow them. Salvok citizens begged for mercy. Some tried to run. Others collapsed in surrender. But the humans didn't care. They had made their choice, and the Salvok were not part of the future. The Emperor's final stand. Virex watched it all unfold from his palace windows. His empire, his legacy, destroyed in a single day. His claws shook. His breath came in ragged gasps. He had believed the humans to be just another species to conquer. But they weren't. They were something else entirely. Something far worse. His guards were gone. His advisors had fled. He was alone. And then, the doors behind him opened. He turned. A single human soldier stood there. The same black-armored warrior who had appeared before. Virex's mouth went dry. The human stepped forward, stopping just a few feet away. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the human soldier tilted his head. You thought yourself gods. His voice was calm. But you were never gods. Virex's knees buckled. His once great empire was nothing but dust now. He had no words left to say. The human raised a hand. Virex closed his eyes. And then, the supreme High Lord of the Salvok was no more. By nightfall, Zaltor was silent. There were no more screams, no more fighting. The great cities of the Salvok, once filled with power and pride, stood empty. The empire that had ruled for centuries had been erased in a single day. The Death Fleet remained above the planet for a few hours longer. Then, without a word, the ships turned and vanished into the void. Their mission was complete. Humanity had delivered its final message. Never again. News of the Salvok's fall spread faster than light. The great empires, the old alliances, the powerful warlords, all received the same terrifying reports. Zaltor is gone. The Death Fleet came. No one survived. At first, no one believed it. The Salvok were too powerful, too advanced. Humanity was supposed to be insignificant. But then, the evidence became undeniable. Surveillance drones captured footage of the silent human warships hovering over the dead world. Merchant ships traveling through Salvok space found nothing but empty stations and ghost ships. Entire planets had been left hollow, as if the people had simply vanished. And worst of all, there were no bodies, no wreckage, no sign of battle, just the echoes of something unnatural, something unstoppable. that Salvok hadn't been defeated. They had been erased from existence. Panic among the great powers. On the galactic capital world of Velthar Prime, the leaders of the most powerful civilizations gathered in an emergency council. The room buzzed with fear. The Zorveni Empire, the Dreth Dominion, the ancient Helith Ascendancy, species that had ruled for thousands of years, sat in uneasy silence. For centuries, they had seen humans as just another primitive race. Now, they were afraid. The Velthar Chancellor rose to speak, his voice tight with anxiety. The humans have done the impossible. They have wiped out an empire in a single day. No warnings, no diplomacy, only destruction. The room murmured with tension. A Helith warlord stood up, his golden eyes flashing. We must act. If the humans are this dangerous, they cannot be allowed to remain unchecked. A Dreth general, his thick armor gleaming, shook his head. And how exactly do you propose we stop them? Silence. Because no one had an answer. No one even knew how the humans had done it. What technology had they used? What horrors had they unleashed? The Salvok had been strong, their defenses unmatched. And yet, the humans had erased them like they were nothing. The Velthar Chancellor finally spoke again. His voice was low. Perhaps we should not make the same mistake as the Salvok. A hush fell over the chamber, because everyone knew what he meant. There was only one option left. Not war, not resistance, submission. The message to Earth. It was the first time in galactic history that the great empires had agreed on anything. A message was sent to Earth's high command. It was not a declaration of war. It was a plea, a promise, a simple transmission sent across the stars. Humanity, we recognize your power. We acknowledge our past arrogance. We will not stand against you. We only ask for peace. They waited for a response. For hours, for days, no reply came. Only silence. And that silence was worse than any threat, because the galaxy now knew one terrifying truth. Humanity did not need their peace. On Velthar Prime, the greatest rulers of the galaxy sat together in uneasy silence. The Zorveni Empress, once proud and untouchable, clenched her hands together, trying to hide the trembling in her fingers. The Dreth warlord, covered in his species' heavy armor, kept glancing toward the sky, as if expecting human warships to appear at any moment. The Helith Ascendancy's high priest, who had once declared humans to be unworthy of the stars, now whispered desperate prayers under his breath. They had sent their message. They had begged for peace, and yet the humans had not responded. Why? Were they deciding the fate of the galaxy at this very moment? Were they deliberating who would live and who would be erased next? Or were they simply ignoring them? The thought was unbearable. The galaxy had never feared a single species like this before, because this wasn't just military strength. It wasn't just superior weapons. It was something far worse. The unknown. No one understood how the humans had done it. How had an empire like the Salvok, one of the most advanced civilizations in history, been wiped out so easily? What weapon had been used? What terrible force had the humans unleashed? And worst of all, could they do it again? When humanity's response finally arrived, it was not what anyone expected. A single transmission from Earth's high command. The words were simple, and yet they carried the weight of 1,000 wars. We have no demands, no treaties, no need for war. We are finished here. Stay out of our way. That was it. No ultimatums, no threats, just a warning that the galaxy would never forget. The message was broadcast across every major system, to every empire, every warlord, every species that had once thought themselves superior to humans. And with that, the Death Fleet vanished. The terrifying warships that had erased the Salvok simply disappeared into deep space. No one knew where they went. No one dared to follow. Because one thing was clear. Humanity had proven their point. They were not here to conquer. They did not want to rule. But if anyone ever crossed them again, the entire galaxy knew what would happen. The New Order. For years after the fall of Saltor, the galaxy lived in silence. The great empires that had once fought endless wars no longer dared to challenge each other. Treaties were signed. Conflicts ended. Borders remained untouched. Because everyone knew that somewhere, hidden in the darkness of space, humanity was still watching. No one saw their fleets again. No one heard from their high command. But the memory of what they had done never faded. It became a legend. A whispered warning passed down through generations. Never provoke the humans. Never test their wrath. Because if you do, there will be nothing left of you. And so, for the first time in galactic history, the stars remained at peace, because the galaxy had learned one simple truth. Humanity did not rule the stars. They simply decided who was allowed to exist in them.